They called her the beast in the sack, but the mountain man found an Apache heart inside it. In a small, rugged town on the edge of the mountains, people whispered about a woman whom everyone called the beast in the sack. She lived alone in a modest cabin at the edge of the forest, far from the center of town. Her life was shaped by the wild landscape around her, the thick trees, the rushing rivers, and the harsh winters that left little room for weakness. She had learned from a young age that survival meant being strong, clever, and, most of all, independent. The woman was not like the others in town. While most women spent their days doing chores in the homes of their families or learning to sew and cook, she roamed the forests, hunted for her food, and repaired her cabin with her own hands. Her hair was long, dark, and often tangled with leaves or dust from the trails she walked. Her hands, rough from labor, held a quiet strength that few could match. People who had only seen her in town described her as fierce, even intimidating. They didn't understand that her toughness came from necessity, from a life that had taught her to trust herself above all else. Children were both afraid and fascinated by her. They whispered stories as they ran past her cabin on the way to school. Some said she could track animals better than any man in town, while others insisted she could survive alone in a snowstorm without fire or shelter. Adults didn't speak directly about her, but their glances, half fear and half admiration, told the same story. They called her the beast in the sack because she did not follow the rules society had set for women. They did not know her heart, and so they made a name for her that reflected what they could not understand. Despite her reputation, the woman had a life that was quietly full. She loved the mountains for their honesty. They gave her everything she needed: food, water, and space to think. Every morning she would walk through the forest, noticing the smallest changes in the trails and rivers. She learned the songs of the birds and the habits of the deer. She could tell when a storm was coming by the smell of the air and the position of the clouds. In a way, the mountains were her family, steady and constant, while the townspeople were uncertain and quick to judge. Her days followed a rhythm that suited her. She would wake at dawn, prepare a simple breakfast, and check the traps she had set for small animals. She gathered herbs from the forest, not just for cooking, but also for medicine. She was careful and patient, learning from years of trial and error. Her nights were spent by the fire, reading worn books she had collected from travelers, or thinking about the world beyond the mountains. She had a sharp mind and a keen sense of observation. Even though others saw only a rough, solitary woman, she was capable of deep thought and reflection. Life in the town was very different from life in the forest. People lived close together, and gossip traveled quickly. Every action was noticed and judged. The woman had learned early on to ignore the chatter, but it was impossible to be completely unseen. Stories about her circulated, exaggerated with every telling. Some claimed she had survived dangerous storms alone, while others said she had faced wild animals without fear. The truth was a little different. She was cautious, intelligent, and brave, but she did not seek glory. She did what she needed to survive, nothing more, nothing less. Yet, in a town that valued appearances over reality, such independence was both admired and feared. The woman had few friends, but those she trusted knew her true nature. She was loyal and protective, ready to help anyone in need, but only if they approached her with respect and honesty. She had no patience for lies or cruelty. The few people who earned her trust saw her kindness, her humor, and the warmth that she kept hidden beneath her tough exterior. She was capable of great empathy, but only for those who respected her boundaries. In a town that misunderstood her, these qualities were invisible to most. Every so often, travelers passed through the town and saw the woman in the forest or near her cabin. Some were curious, others cautious. Many were surprised when they discovered how self-sufficient she was, how skilled she had become at living in harmony with the wild. She could cook, sew, hunt, and navigate the forest with ease. She could start a fire in the rain and mend clothes that seemed beyond repair. To anyone who judged her only by the stories, this was shocking. To her, it was simply life. The woman's life was shaped by challenges that would have frightened many. Winters were long and bitter, with snowdrifts that blocked paths for weeks. In spring, floods sometimes washed away the trails she had cleared. Summers brought heat, fire risks, and unpredictable storms. Yet she faced these challenges with patience and courage. Each obstacle became a lesson. Each challenge made her stronger, more aware, and more connected to the land she called home. Though she lived alone, she was not lonely. She found comfort in the rhythm of nature, the sound of the river, and the quiet companionship of animals. A fox sometimes appeared near her cabin, unafraid, as if recognizing a kindred spirit. Birds nested near her porch, and squirrels treated her presence as part of the normal forest life. She found beauty in small things: a perfectly shaped stone, a bird in flight, the first green leaves after a long winter. These moments reminded her that life was not just survival, but also observation, appreciation, and connection. Despite the isolation, the woman knew the town was never far away. She would occasionally trade goods, bring back news, and listen to stories from travelers. She did not crave recognition, but she was aware of the whispers that followed her. They did not bother her in the way people expected. She did not feel anger, only a quiet acknowledgement that the world often misunderstands what it cannot control or comprehend. Her nickname, the beast in the sack, was not an insult in her eyes. It was a reflection of the narrowness of others' imagination, nothing more. The woman's life was about balance. She balanced danger with caution, independence with the occasional need for help, and solitude with observation of the world around her. She had learned to trust her instincts, to rely on her skills, and to judge character carefully. People in town could speculate about her all they wanted, but she understood the truth about herself. She was strong, capable, and determined, but she was also human, capable of kindness, humor, and loyalty. Her life was complex, and it could not be reduced to a nickname or rumor. And so, each day she continued her work, lived by her rules, and moved through the forest with quiet confidence. She knew who she was and what she valued. She did not seek approval, yet her actions spoke louder than words ever could. In the eyes of the town, she might always remain a beast, but to those who saw her clearly, she was something far rarer, a person living fully, honestly, and bravely, shaped by the wild, yet guided by a heart that no one had yet truly understood. The woman had lived in the forest for many years, growing comfortable in the rhythm of the land and the quiet life she had built for herself. Yet one autumn morning, as the first orange and gold leaves began to fall from the trees, a new presence appeared on the trails near her cabin. It was a man she had never seen before, moving carefully but confidently through the forest. He was tall and strong, with a broad hat that shaded his face from the sun, and his clothes were worn from travel. Something about his calm, steady pace suggested he belonged in the wilderness as much as she did. The townspeople had noticed him first. Travelers spoke of a mountain man who roamed the northern valleys, trading with few and keeping mostly to himself. Rumors reached her ears. He was a skilled tracker, a wise observer of nature, and someone who had survived alone in the harshest conditions. The woman listened, curious but cautious. She had learned to be careful when strangers approached. Most people carried fear, pride, or judgment with them, and she had little patience for any of it. Their first meeting was accidental. She was gathering herbs near the riverbank, her basket swinging gently at her side, when she noticed movement in the trees. The man stepped into view, pausing to observe her without making a sound. He did not speak immediately, only tilted his head as if studying the patterns of the forest around him. At first, she tensed, her hand instinctively reaching for the small knife at her belt, but something in his calm manner told her he meant no harm. He nodded briefly, a silent greeting, and returned to his path along the river. For several days after, she spotted him occasionally, always at a distance. Sometimes he was fishing near the river, other times walking along the ridgelines, observing the land as if it were a living map he had memorized. She watched him too, intrigued by his quiet confidence. Unlike most of the townspeople, he did not rush or make unnecessary noise. He moved with purpose, aware of his surroundings, and completely at ease in the forest. She felt a strange mixture of caution and curiosity. Who was this man, and why had he come to her mountains? The first time they spoke, it was purely practical. He had found a path blocked by a fallen tree and needed help lifting a large branch. She approached silently, offering her assistance without a word. He glanced at her, surprise flickering in his eyes, and accepted. Together they moved the branch, working in a rhythm neither had to explain. When the task was finished, he nodded respectfully, his eyes briefly meeting hers. There was no small talk, no judgment, only acknowledgement of skill and cooperation. In the following days their paths crossed more frequently, each encounter building a silent understanding. He admired her independence, her knowledge of the land, and her resourcefulness. She, in turn, noticed his patience, his ability to read the forest, and the quiet respect he showed for both nature and people. Unlike the townspeople, he did not whisper rumors or try to control her. He simply existed alongside her in the forest, like another creature who belonged there. One afternoon, they shared a small moment that changed the way they saw each other. She had trapped a deer for food, but it had gotten caught in an awkward position. She struggled to free it without hurting it, and he appeared, offering advice rather than taking control. His calm explanation helped her release the animal safely, and for the first time, she felt a connection that went beyond words. He did not judge her mistakes, and she did not feel the need to prove herself.
No way from that. No.
They worked together, learning from each other in a silent partnership born of respect. Word of their interactions reached the town, of course, though the details were always exaggerated. Some people claimed they were conspiring against the town. Others whispered that she had found someone who could finally tame her, but the woman paid no attention. She understood the difference between rumor and reality. The mountain man was not there to change her, and she had no desire to change for anyone. Still, she found herself looking forward to his visits, noticing how his presence brought a sense of calm she could not explain. As autumn deepened, their interactions became more frequent and purposeful. They began to share knowledge of the forest. He taught her a few tricks for tracking animals more efficiently, and she showed him which herbs could heal minor injuries. They worked together to repair trails, collect firewood, and check the condition of the river for fishing. The cooperation was practical, but it created a quiet bond, built on shared experience rather than conversation. The woman realized that trust could grow slowly, quietly, in the company of someone who understood the rhythms of the land. Despite this growing connection, tension remained. She was wary of letting anyone get too close. Her life had been shaped by independence, and she knew that relying too much on another person could bring danger. He respected her boundaries, never pushing, never asking more than she was willing to give. Their relationship developed at a natural pace, each learning to appreciate the other's strengths and quirks. The mountain man, patient and observant, did not rush her, and she began to feel that perhaps someone could see her for who she truly was. Winter approached, and the first frost coated the forest in silver. The woman prepared for the harsh months, stocking food, repairing her cabin, and gathering firewood. The mountain man occasionally helped, always with a quiet nod or brief comment, never intruding. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, they sat near the fire she had built outside her cabin. Smoke curled upward, mixing with the cold air, and for the first time they spoke freely. He asked about her life, her experiences, and the lessons she had learned in the forest. She answered honestly, surprised at how easy it was to speak with him. He listened with attention, not interruption, and she realized that this was someone who truly valued her thoughts. Through these conversations, she began to see a side of herself she rarely acknowledged. The woman who had always been defined by rumors and nicknames was not just the fierce, independent figure the town imagined. She was also thoughtful, wise, and capable of forming deep connections. The mountain man's presence did not diminish her independence. Instead, it highlighted her strength and resilience. He admired her for who she truly was, and in return she found herself respecting his skills, his insight, and his quiet integrity. As winter settled in, the forest became more silent, and their bond quietly strengthened. They continued to share work, conversation, and moments of observation, learning to rely on one another in small but meaningful ways. The townspeople could not understand it. They saw only a woman with a reputation and a stranger from the mountains. But the truth was simple. Two people who respected the land and each other were forming a connection that went beyond gossip, rumors, and fear. By the time snow began to blanket the forest, the woman realized that her life was changing, not in ways that threatened her independence, but in ways that expanded her understanding of trust, friendship, and partnership. The mountain man had not come to tame her, nor had she needed to be tamed. Instead, he had come to show her that someone could walk beside her, silently, patiently, and with respect for all she was. And for the first time she felt that the nickname she had carried for so long, the beast in the sack, mattered less than the quiet bond she was forming in the heart of the forest. Winter had settled over the mountains, turning the forest into a quiet world of frost and snow. The trees were bare and the river flowed slower, its edges frozen with ice. Life in such a season demanded patience, preparation, and caution. The woman was used to it. She had faced winters like this before, relying on her skill and knowledge of the land. But now, with the mountain man by her side, her days felt different, not easier, but somehow more complete. They began their mornings with the same routine, checking traps, preparing firewood, and ensuring their supplies were enough to last the day. The mountain man had a methodical way of doing things, and she found that his patience complemented her speed and efficiency. He taught her a few tricks she had not considered before, like arranging firewood in a way that burned longer during the freezing nights, or how to read faint animal tracks in the snow to predict their movements. She was impressed by his knowledge, and she noticed that he, in turn, seemed equally impressed by her ability to survive and thrive alone. One morning they set out together to gather herbs and firewood along a ridge near her cabin. The snow was soft underfoot, and the cold air stung their cheeks. As they moved, the mountain man pointed out subtle signs in the forest. A broken branch that suggested a deer had passed, a patch of disturbed snow where a fox had hunted, the faint smell of sap indicating healthy trees. She followed his observations carefully, realizing how much more she could notice when she slowed down and observed with intention. They worked together naturally, communicating through gestures, brief words, and shared understanding rather than long conversations. The first real challenge came when they reached the edge of the forest where the river ran faster than usual. A sudden thaw had caused part of the riverbank to collapse, making it dangerous to cross. She had seen rivers like this before, But the mountain man studied the water with careful attention, scanning for hidden currents and weak ice. They tested the crossing together, using long branches to balance and secure themselves. It was slow and demanding work, but they succeeded without incident. As they reached the other side, she realized how much she valued his calm presence in situations where panic could easily have taken over. Over the next few days, they worked on a variety of tasks that required cooperation. They repaired parts of her cabin that had been damaged by snow, stored firewood efficiently, and ensured that their traps for small animals were secure. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire outside, sharing stories about their past experiences. The woman spoke sparingly at first, reluctant to reveal too much of herself. But the mountain man had a way of listening that made her feel safe. He asked questions without judgment, and she began to speak honestly about her life in the forest, the lessons she had learned, and the moments that had shaped her. One evening, a small crisis occurred that tested their teamwork and trust. A young deer had become trapped in a snare, struggling and injuring itself in the process. The woman rushed to help, but the animal was frightened and unpredictable. She knelt, speaking softly, trying to calm it, but it was the mountain man who suggested a careful approach. Move slowly, secure the animal with a rope, and support it gently. They followed the plan together, each action deliberate and precise. After several tense minutes, the deer was freed without serious injury. In that moment, she realized that having someone beside her who could remain calm under pressure was not a weakness, it was a strength. As the days passed, their connection grew deeper, not just through work, but through shared understanding. They began to anticipate each other's needs, offering help without being asked, and noticing details that the other might overlook. For example, he would collect herbs she hadn't noticed, and she would repair parts of his gear that had worn from travel. It was a silent conversation, one built on trust, respect, and mutual admiration. She found herself laughing more than usual, a sound that had become rare in her solitary life. The mountain man's quiet humor, often expressed through small gestures or clever observations, made even the harshest days feel lighter. Winter storms tested their growing partnership. One evening, heavy snow began to fall, covering the trails and making travel difficult. They worked together to reinforce the cabin, stacking firewood, covering weak spots, and ensuring the small fire would burn throughout the night. The storm continued into the next day, and they remained inside, cooking simple meals and sharing stories. The woman noticed how comfortable it felt to have someone to rely on, someone who respected her space while also being present in times of need. The mountain man never tried to take over or diminish her independence. He simply offered his presence, steady and dependable. During a particularly harsh night, the wind howled around the cabin, and snowdrifts threatened to block the doorway. They worked side by side, shoveling snow and reinforcing the entrance. At one point, she paused, her breath heavy, and he handed her a steaming cup of tea without a word. It was a small gesture, but it carried meaning, care without expectation, help without demand. She realized that this was what trust felt like, not just relying on someone for survival, but knowing they valued her as a person and respected her autonomy. As winter continued, they began to share moments of quiet observation. They would sit outside the cabin at dawn or dusk, watching the sunrise or listening to the soft fall of snow. She taught him to notice subtle changes in the forest, the shift of wind patterns, the behavior of birds, the tracks of animals hidden beneath fresh snow. He, in turn, taught her patience in a new way, showing her that sometimes the forest's lessons required stillness and observation rather than action. These moments were peaceful but powerful, building a sense of connection that went beyond conversation or work. Despite the growing bond, she remained cautious. Independence had been her shield for so long, and trust was not something she gave lightly. Yet she began to see that the mountain man was different from anyone she had ever met. He did not judge her, pressure her, or try to control her. He accepted her as she was, a strong, capable woman living on her own terms. And in return, he shared his own experiences, his respect for the land, and his understanding of life in the wilderness. Their relationship was evolving quietly, built on shared experience, respect, and mutual reliance. One day, as they returned from checking traps, they found tracks in the snow leading to her cabin. Wolves had been nearby, moving cautiously through the forest. The woman studied the tracks, noting their direction, size, and pattern. The mountain man observed alongside her, offering insight into their behavior. Together, they decided on precautions, reinforcing the area around the cabin and preparing for any potential encounters. Now, this was another lesson in partnership, facing danger together, combining knowledge and skill, and trusting each other's judgment. By the end of winter, the woman had begun to notice subtle changes in herself. She felt less isolated, more connected to someone who understood both her independence and her need for trust. The mountain man had not changed who she was, nor had she changed for him. Instead, they had grown together, learning to navigate life's challenges as a team. She realized that partnership did not mean losing herself. It meant sharing the journey with someone who valued and respected her for exactly who she was. As the snow began to melt and the first signs of spring appeared, they stood together at the edge of the forest, watching the river swell with melted snow. The woman felt a sense of gratitude for the quiet bond they had built. The mountain man did not need to speak. His presence, his respect, and his steady companionship had already said everything. And in that moment, she understood something she had never admitted before. Strength was not only in survival or skill, but also in the ability to let someone share the journey without losing oneself. Spring had arrived in the mountains, bringing new life to the forest. The snow had melted in most places. The river flowed faster with the runoff from the higher peaks, and the first green shoots of grass appeared in clearings. For the woman, this season was always a time of work and renewal. She checked traps, repaired her cabin, and gathered fresh herbs. Yet she had grown accustomed to having the mountain man by her side. Their routines had become intertwined, their trust deepened, and even in the calm of spring, she felt the strength of their partnership. One morning, as sunlight filtered through the trees, they noticed a large tree had fallen across the trail leading to the river. The tree had broken during a spring storm, its roots torn from the ground. This was not an ordinary obstacle. The river beyond the tree was swollen from recent rains, making it dangerous to cross at any other point. Without hesitation, they began to plan how to remove it. The woman examined the tree carefully, judging its weight and the best way to move it. The mountain man offered suggestions, pointing out weaker branches that could be cleared first. They worked together for hours. The woman used her strength and experience to shift the larger sections of the trunk, while the mountain man stabilized smaller branches and cleared debris. Sweat ran down their faces in the warm spring sun. Their muscles ached, but they did not stop. The task was difficult and exhausting, and the forest seemed to challenge them with every step. Yet, their cooperation was seamless. They communicated without many words, understanding each other's movements and intentions. This challenge became a test of their patience, skill, and trust. By late afternoon, they had cleared a path, but the effort left them both tired and hungry. They decided to rest by the river, sharing a simple meal of bread, dried meat, and herbs. As they ate, they watched the current swirl past, its strength a reminder of the power of nature. The woman realized that she had grown to depend on the mountain man, not in a way that made her weak, but in a way that made them both stronger. She could trust him in situations where her own strength alone might not have been enough. That true test came a few days later. A young boy from the town, lost while exploring the forest, stumbled upon the woman's cabin. He was frightened, cold, and slightly injured. She immediately took him inside, cleaned his scrapes, and gave him warm clothes and food. While she cared for him, the mountain man stayed alert, listening for signs of predators and checking the forest for any immediate danger. Together, they created a safe space for the child. Soon, they realized that the boy's parents were frantically searching for him. The woman and the mountain man decided to return him to the town safely, but the journey would be challenging. The forest was dense in places, and some areas were still muddy or slippery from the melting snow. They prepared carefully, packing food, blankets, and tools for the journey. The mountain man guided their route, choosing safer paths and avoiding unstable ground, while the woman kept the boy calm and reassured. During the walk back, a sudden storm appeared over the mountains. Rain fell heavily, turning the forest floor into a slick, treacherous path. The river they needed to cross had risen, its current strong enough to sweep away anyone who lost balance. The woman felt her heart race, but she did not panic. She knew that panic could make the situation worse. The mountain man stayed calm, directing her steps and keeping the boy safe between them. They found a fallen log that could serve as a bridge, carefully testing it before crossing. Step by step they moved across, the storm whipping around them. Once they reached the other side, they realized that trust and cooperation had carried them through the worst of the storm. The boy was frightened but unharmed, and the woman felt a deep sense of pride in what they had accomplished together. The mountain man's presence had not only made the journey possible, but had also strengthened the bond between them. She realized that true strength was not just in surviving alone, but in facing danger together with someone who understood and respected her abilities. After returning the boy safely to his grateful parents, the woman and the mountain man walked back to her cabin in silence. They had shared an intense experience that tested their courage, judgment, and teamwork. Words were not necessary. Their trust in each other had grown stronger than ever. The woman realized that while she had always been independent and capable, she had discovered a new form of strength in partnership, a strength that did not diminish her own abilities but enhanced them. The days that followed were calmer, but still full of work. They repaired the cabin, checked traps, and prepared for the remaining weeks of spring. Yet there was a subtle change in their interactions. She noticed small gestures, how he would ensure she had warm water, how he quietly watched her when she needed assistance, how he respected her decisions even while offering guidance. These gestures were small but meaningful, reinforcing the trust they had built during the crisis. One afternoon, while gathering herbs near a quiet stream, they encountered another challenge. A small landslide had blocked their path, and the soil was unstable. The woman tested the ground carefully, and the mountain man observed her, suggesting safe areas to step. They worked together to move rocks and clear debris, relying on each other's judgment and skill. The experience reminded her that life in the forest was never predictable. Challenges could appear at any moment, and having someone dependable by her side made them manageable rather than overwhelming. Through these experiences, the woman began to reflect on the difference between fear and caution. Fear could paralyze a person, making survival difficult, while caution combined with skill and trust could turn obstacles into opportunities. She recognized that the mountain man brought balance to her life, not by changing her, but by complementing her strengths and supporting her when needed. She could be herself, independent and strong, while also embracing the benefits of partnership. As spring continued, they shared moments of quiet joy. They watched the first flowers bloom, listened to birds returning from their winter migration, and marveled at the changing forest. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat together outside the cabin, sipping warm tea. The woman looked at the mountain man and realized that the nickname the townspeople had given her, the beast in the sack, no longer mattered. It had never truly defined her. What mattered was the connection she had found with someone who saw her for who she truly was: strong, capable, and full of heart. The turning point of that spring had shown her something essential. Life was not only about surviving alone, but also about sharing experiences, facing challenges, and growing together with someone who understood and respected you. She had learned that courage could be multiplied when shared, that trust was a powerful force, and that independence did not require isolation. The woman and the mountain man had discovered a new rhythm in the forest, a way of moving through life that combined skill, respect, and partnership. By the end of spring, the forest was alive with color and movement. Streams flowed freely, flowers bloomed, and animals emerged from their winter hiding places. The woman and the mountain man continued their routines, but their bond had changed. They faced challenges together, shared responsibilities, and learned to rely on each other without fear or hesitation. The experiences of the past weeks had solidified their trust, deepened their understanding, and strengthened the foundation of a partnership that would guide them through future challenges. And in that quiet forest, far from the judgment and whispers of the town, the woman realized that she had found something rare, a companion who valued her strength, respected her independence, and shared her love for the land. Together, they had faced the storms, crossed the rivers, and overcome obstacles that neither could have managed alone. The turning point of that spring had transformed her understanding of life, courage, and connection, revealing that even the strongest person could benefit from a bond built on trust, respect, and shared experience. By the time summer approached, the forest had fully awakened from the long winter. Trees were dense with green leaves, flowers painted the meadows with bright colors, and birds filled the air with songs from dawn to dusk. The woman had never loved the mountains more than she did in this season. Every trail, every river, and every tree felt alive, reminding her of how resilient and adaptable the land was. And through it all, the mountain man had become an inseparable part of her life, not as a master or teacher, but as a companion, equal in skill, respect, and understanding. Their mornings followed a familiar rhythm. She would check the traps while he repaired tools or gathered firewood. Sometimes they explored new paths together, discovering hidden clearings or observing wildlife. Their teamwork was seamless. Years of solitude had honed her skills, and his years of experience in the mountains complemented her abilities perfectly. Together they faced the unpredictable nature of the forest, confident that they could overcome any challenge that came their way. The woman began to reflect on how much had changed since the mountain man arrived. Before, her life was defined by independence and solitude. She had trusted herself, relied on her strength, and ignored the whispers of the town. While she had always been proud of her abilities, she realized that trust and companionship could add a depth to life that independence alone could not provide. The mountain man had not changed her. He had only revealed another side of her strength, her ability to connect, to trust, and to work alongside someone who respected her fully. One afternoon they decided to visit the town together. She had avoided the town for years, knowing that the gossip and judgment would follow her steps. But now, with the mountain man by her side, she felt a quiet confidence. They walked the familiar streets, noticing how the town had not changed, yet everything seemed different from her perspective. People whispered and pointed, as always, but their words seemed smaller, less powerful. She knew her own worth, and she understood that the town's nickname for her, the beast in the sack, was meaningless compared to the life she had built and the connections she had formed. The mountain man remained by her side, silent but attentive. He never forced her to confront the whispers, never tried to change her, and never judged her past. He simply walked with her, his steady presence a reminder that she was no longer alone. Together they stopped by the town's edge to help a neighbor who had injured his leg while working in the fields. The woman quickly assessed the situation, cleaned the wound, and wrapped it carefully, while the mountain man gathered supplies and offered guidance. Their teamwork impressed the neighbor, who looked at them with newfound respect. It was the first time the townspeople saw her not as a beast to fear, but as a capable, skilled, and compassionate woman. As the weeks passed, the woman noticed subtle changes in how the town viewed her. Children approached her with curiosity rather than fear, and some adults began to ask for her advice or help with tasks that required skill and knowledge of the forest. She remained cautious, understanding that trust had to be earned slowly, but she appreciated the quiet recognition of her abilities. The nickname that had once stung no longer mattered. It had been replaced by a growing respect that reflected who she truly was. Back in the forest, the bond between the woman and the mountain man continued to deepen. They faced challenges together: flooded trails, unpredictable storms, and encounters with wild animals. But each obstacle reinforced their partnership. They learned from each other, admired each other's strengths, and supported each other's weaknesses. The woman realized that true courage was not only about facing danger alone, but also about trusting someone else to walk beside you when the path became difficult. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky with orange and pink hues, they sat together outside her cabin. Smoke from the fire curled into the cool air, and the forest seemed to hold its breath in quiet anticipation. The woman reflected on her life, the years of solitude, the challenges she had overcome, the rumors she had endured, and the wisdom she had gained. She thought of the mountain man, who had arrived quietly without fanfare and had become her closest companion. She realized that strength was not just physical skill or survival ability. It was also the courage to trust, to connect, and to share life with someone who respected you. The mountain man spoke softly, breaking the silence. He told her about his travels, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned from the mountains. She listened intently, appreciating his insight and his quiet humor. In turn, she shared stories from her own life, memories of her years alone, and the small joys she had found in the forest. They laughed together, spoke honestly, and simply enjoyed each other's presence. It was a rare and precious connection, built on trust, respect, and shared experience. The woman began to see her life differently. She understood that the challenges she had faced, the isolation she had endured, and even the harsh judgment of the town had shaped her into a resilient, wise, and capable person. But she also realized that life was richer when shared with someone who understood and respected her. The mountain man had not taken away her independence. He had only enhanced it, showing her that partnership and trust could coexist with self-reliance. As summer fully arrived, the woman and the mountain man began to plan for the future. They worked together to improve the cabin, prepare for the next season, and ensure that their life in the forest was secure. Their partnership had become a balance of skills, respect, and shared responsibility. She no longer feared dependence, nor did she fear judgment from others. She had found a way to be strong while also being connected, independent while also trusting, capable while also supported. In the quiet moments of summer, the woman noticed the small ways her reputation had begun to shift. Townspeople who once whispered now nodded respectfully when they passed. Children watched her with admiration, learning from her skills and courage. And though some still clung to the old nickname, it no longer defined her. She had learned that true identity comes not from what others say, but from the life you live and the connections you nurture. One day, as they walked through a meadow filled with wildflowers, the woman paused to watch a deer grazing quietly in the distance. She felt a sense of peace she had never known in her years of solitude. The mountain man stood beside her, observing as she smiled softly. In that moment, she understood the true meaning of strength, courage, and partnership. Life was not only about surviving, but about living fully, sharing experiences, and trusting those who respected you. She had discovered that even the strongest person could benefit from companionship, not as a limitation, but as a source of growth and support. The woman reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She had faced winters alone, storms in the mountains, and the judgment of the town. She had been misunderstood, feared, and underestimated. Yet through all of it, she had remained true to herself. The arrival of the mountain man had been unexpected, but it had changed her life in ways she could not have imagined. He had shown her that trust, respect, and partnership could enhance even the strongest independence. As the sun dipped below the mountains that evening, painting the sky in warm shades of gold and pink, the woman felt a deep sense of contentment. She knew that her life would continue to hold challenges, that the forest could be unpredictable, and that judgment from the town might linger. But she also knew that she was no longer alone, that she had someone by her side who valued her for who she truly was, and that together they could face whatever life brought their way. The forest around her was alive, full of color, sound, and movement. The rivers, trees, and animals seemed to mirror her own growth, strong, resilient, and full of life. The woman had learned to navigate the balance between independence and partnership, courage and trust, solitude and connection. She had discovered that true strength comes not only from surviving alone, but from facing life with someone who respects, supports, and understands you. And so, in the heart of the mountains, the woman and the mountain man continued their journey together. Their lives intertwined through seasons, challenges, and quiet moments of reflection. She no longer feared the whispers of the town or the judgment of others. She had discovered her true self, strengthened not only by her own resilience, but also by the bond she shared with someone who valued her entirely. In the forest, in the mountains, and in her own heart, she had found freedom, respect, and the rarest treasure of all, a companion who truly understood her.